Hey, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast for Out of Frame on YouTube. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creator of Out of Frame and creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education. Here today in studio, as usual, with Paul Nelson, our head of social media and also senior marketing manager at FEE. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not bad. You guys will note, and Paul will, of course, also note that we are not joined by Jen Mafasanti today. Jen, I think, is traveling this week and probably next week, so she will not be joining us the next couple episodes, or at least this episode, one more. But Paul and I have some cool stuff to talk to you guys about. In a little bit, we're gonna be talking about A Quiet Place 2, which is one of the first. I mean, not the first movie, because I've seen movies in the theater since last year, actually, but like it's one of the first movies in a long time that I went to see in a theater. I know you went to see the last movie that I think you went to see Nobody in the theater. But this was the first time I've been to a theater without a mask at any point during the experience.
Yes.
So that was pretty exciting. I don't know, man. Some of the stuff's starting to come back a little bit, at least for us. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like, especially where I moved out in Georgia, it's pretty helpful.
So I'm pretty far up north from Atlanta, so it's been open. Some businesses asked you to wear masks, some didn't.
Yeah, that's kind of how Douglasville is.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty open.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it immensely. I mean, it's been like the move from Decatur to Douglasville was like the greatest move of all time, because it really it went from like a place where people are super paranoid to a place where people are actually like pretty normal about everything. And even and the real huge difference, I may have mentioned this before. The real huge difference is that, like, when people ask to like customers to wear a mask places, they're apologetic about it.
Yeah,
they're
not confrontational.
No, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're still doing this, and like, can you?
Okay.
We got no problem. But then it usually is accompanied by like I'm hoping that like in the next week or so we're not gonna have to do this anymore, because mostly it's like employees still having to do it, which I don't know. At this point,
everybody else in the room is not wearing one.
I know. There's so much of this stuff that's just pure theater, and that's one of those things where I'm just like, and even I was at a restaurant the other day, and I'm like looking at the, like the wait staff and the hosts and stuff are wearing masks, but just like barely. And then you can look back in the kitchen and nobody is. And you're just like,
the only place someone's touching your food.
Look, but it's like, you could get mad at that. You're like, oh, but the people who are, respond. But I don't care, first of all. And secondly, I'm not.
Yeah, you're not.
So
and also,
I'm sitting there at the table.
Made the choice to go to this restaurant. So,
yeah. I
mean, you assume the risks.
You should. And the risks are minor. So it's not that big of a deal. But it's been nice. But going to the theater was I think, a big shift, because the last time that my wife and I went to the theater, we got accosted by somebody for wearing the wrong masks.
The wrong mask.
Yeah, not just, which is actually really funny to me. I had a filtered mask. I had a mask that actually had 2 layers and had the little like paper filters.
You're like Bane.
Yeah, kind of. Except for it wasn't metal. If it was actually really, I mean, if I was smarter at the early stages of this, I would have just gotten like the coolest Bane mask possible. But then they were like, you can't have a mask that's got like the filter things. And I'm like, why? And she goes, because it's not allowed here. And she got really upset about it. And she gave me a paper mask instead. And I was like, this is definitely worse. Like, there's not a chance that this is.
Yeah, it's
just.
It was surprising.
Yeah.
How much. How much stupidity? I guess I couldn't think of a better word.
No,
it's just
I think that's the only way to describe it. I mean, that's probably been what for me. I mean, just the way that my brain works in general is. It's often like it rails against things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Like that's just generally how I live my life. It's like, why?
Explain it to me. If it makes sense, okay.
Totally good, right? But like, and that's what, I mean, part of it is just like that willingness. Like it sort of drives my willingness to dig on things and to like look up stuff if I don't understand it or whatever, and try to get to the bottom of stuff. But it all like always kind of comes down to the root of like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Okay, well, I start digging and I'm like, that still doesn't make sense. Once I'm at that point, which I've been all, the last year and a half, pretty much, it's like, then it's just maddening to me because I'm looking at this stuff going like, well, why would you wear, why would it be okay for that person but not okay for that person? Why would this job be okay and not that job? Why would this, like all of these things, and you just go, oh, it's just politics.
Yeah.
It's just pure, it's fear, it's the media, it's politics, it's all of that stuff. It's like, it's not actually science. It's not actually like anything that makes any rational sense. And if it did, we would make completely different decisions about a lot of these things. So that's been, I don't know. It's just been really exciting to sort of start to see the other side of it and start to see like it coming down. Of course, now we're dealing with, high prices everywhere and inflation.
Yeah, we got an infrastructure bill coming though, so another
great.
$1 trillion in spending is going to fix us right up.
Yeah, I'm definitely another $1 trillion flooding into the economy is
It'll work
for sure.
It'll work.
Going to work. Good grief. Yeah. That's that's a lot. But before we get into A Quiet Place, I want to say I've been watching. So we had a few weeks ago. I put out. I think I mentioned this on the show. We put out a survey. I put out a survey asking people for what anime suggestions they wanted me to watch, and I'll tell you, I'm getting into Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It's not bad.
Yeah.
I'm into the 3rd season now. I'm not that far in. Like I don't remember 6. I think 6 seasons that I got to get through.
How many episodes per season?
It's not that bad. It's I think it changes over the seasons, but I think it's like 13.
Okay.
Somewhere.
It's not like 30.
No, it's not. It's not too insane.
Okay.
It's been good. There are things about it that I don't love. Like there are things about it like it has some tonal shifts in the humor. So the story is about, it's the Full Metal Alchemist. It's like a continuation of that story, which is basically 2 brothers who I think are both supposed to be teenagers. The Edward, the main guy, is I think 16, maybe 17, and his brother Alphonse is 13 or 14, something like that. But they act like little kids a lot of the time. And some of that is in the style of humor that they use, because sometimes like the animation style is, like standard anime, but they're like adult characters or they're teenage characters or whatever. And then suddenly they'll do like Teen Titans Go level, like wild, like, caricature, big heads, tiny bodies, kind of like, And that's, that's kind of a trope with a lot of that stuff, and I kind of get it, but I don't really like it because it just kind of undercuts the seriousness of other parts of the story, and I don't really love that. Like, I think you can do, and the comparison I would give is Avatar, except for Avatar does do a little bit of that. Like, Avatar does have moments where Aang especially is like, well, and all the characters in some cases, like, get animated.
Isn't he a kid, though?
He is a kid, so that is part of it. Like, you can... one of the examples I'm really thinking about is like examples with him playing with the Momo, the flying kind of monkey character. Like they do some like goofy kiddie stuff in that, but like he is a kid, first of all, and it doesn't come up that much. I feel like in Full Metal Alchemist it's come up a lot, and it's super jarring to me. So I don't love that part about it, but the story's interesting, and the story's getting more interesting as I go through it because there's a lot of mysteries, and I think there's going to be a lot of corruption inside the military. So it's all this like sort of fascist militaristic thing where the military, it's kind of I don't know if it's like officially a dictatorship, although there is a Fuhrer. So there is that. But it's like people are actually getting killed in the story too. So there's stakes, like one of the Eldrick brothers' friends, or one of their coworkers, really, who's another, I think he was a colonel in the military, gets killed, and it's like somebody gets framed for it. So there's just like a big mystery part of it, which is pretty interesting. So I don't know. I'm getting into it. I can't say I've taken some notes. I'm trying to take some notes on like out of frame kind of content, but
yeah,
I don't exactly know where it's going yet. So
it'll be interesting.
I reserve my judgment.
It's a whole new world.
It is, and I'm trying not to be prejudgy about it either. So that's kind of the main thing. What have you been watching?
Honestly, not a lot. And the reason why is because the movie we're talking about this week, Out of Frame, A Quiet Place 2, is I haven't seen A Quiet Place.
You didn't see A Quiet Place 1
until earlier this week.
Yeah.
And so
that feels like a miss to me.
Well, I'm not and we'll probably get into this quickly. I guess we're diving right in.
Yeah, let's get into it. We're going to get into it
dive right in.
I think we'll have no.
Tie in.
All right. So, we're going to talk about Quiet Place 2. I think for those who haven't seen A Quiet Place, we're definitely spoiling a lot of that.
Yeah.
Probably all of that. So my apologies there. We will probably have to spoil a little bit of Quiet Place 2.
I mean, you know where it's going to end up.
You do. I feel like, look, I've said this before. I'll say it again. I don't think you can. Roger Ebert said this too. A good movie's never is always too short, and a bad movie's never short enough. I think is the gist of that quote. But I also feel like it's really hard to spoil a good movie. Like a good movie is something that is going to be watchable for a myriad of reasons. Like there's going to be multiple layers to it, and just knowing some of the plot beats.
Yeah, and there's no big twists like spoiling Han Solo getting killed by his son.
Oh,
which I was spoiled.
Yeah, that is.
I was frustrated.
Yeah.
So there's no twist. It's not like Michael Scott takes off the alien mask and he's the evil alien the whole time.
Right. Michael Scott.
Yeah. So there's nothing like that. The story plays out as you would think it would.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. So let's start with let's talk about horror too, but let's start with A Quiet Place, because if you haven't seen that, the gist, and actually this movie I thought handled the sort of recap of the first movie really well, because it pulled, like, A Quiet Place 2 opens with more than we actually got from A Quiet Place 1 on like what happened. So
day one
is John Krasinski's his Lee Abbott and his family are at a baseball game, or like a little league game, with their son Marcus, and then he's at bat when asteroids, meteors, some kind of something from outer space that is very terrifying comes down in a fiery, cloud, and then literally minutes later, there are just horrifying aliens running all over the place, murdering people. And so Quiet Place 1, of course, is like literally that first day. Like it's all of that, how John Krasinski gets to his wife, real life wife, Emily Blunt plays his wife in this movie, Evelyn, how they get the family back together, how they survive. And what kind of makes it really unique is that they are a family with a deaf daughter. Mm-hmm. And that is actually their greatest advantage in this case, because these aliens don't really seem to have eyes, really, or noses that are particularly functional, but they have great hearing. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing that allows their family to survive more than anybody else is that they're able to use sign language to communicate with each other, and they can get around needing to speak directly, primarily because their daughter's deaf. And so that's a pretty interesting twist on the genre. There's obviously a lot of, monster movies and kind of, like horrifying aliens attack kind of situations. But it also it gave a lot of room for character development along a line that we don't normally see, which I really enjoyed in the first movie. But by the way, I'm with you. I don't like horror that much. So
yeah, I really, it's probably my least favorite genre, and the reason why is that most horror movies they don't have a very good they don't take humans either serious, or they just don't think human nature is that great.
No, usually they think it's the worst.
And that's the cause of
Yeah.
the monster. And
yeah.
I fundamentally disagree with that. I think humans are at their core good.
Yeah, overwhelmingly.
And-
I think that's true.
And not saying they're perfect or anything like that,
No.
but their human nature is to be in a community, to care for one another.
Yeah.
And that's what A Quiet Place does so well.
Yeah.
And, I'm pretty disappointed that I put it off this long,
Yeah.
just because it's classified under horror. But
I'm with you on this, though. Like, I do this a lot. Like, I am not a fan of the genre that much, and it's a high bar for me to be convinced to go out of my way to watch a horror movie. A Quiet Place, for me, A Quiet Place had been very positively reviewed by a couple of my friends who actually trust, and I trust their judgment on these kinds of things. And so that was pretty compelling to me at the beginning. Also, I like John Krasinski and I like Emily Blunt as people outside of them being actors, but I've liked a lot of both of their work. I mean, I'm a big fan of I guess we call it Live, Die, Repeat now, but Edge of Tomorrow. And Emily Blunt is phenomenal in that movie, and I love that movie a ton. So I'm pretty on board with like going to watch Emily Blunt act pretty much anytime. Same with Krasinski. He's done a lot of really interesting things, and as a writer and a director, I thought that would be interesting. So I had high hopes going in, but normally with horror, I feel the same way. I think a lot of times it assumes human nature is much, much, much worse than it actually is. There's that sort of Mr. Rogers quote of look for the helpers or whatever. Anytime there's a disaster, like look for people helping, you'll find them everywhere.
Right.
Like if you actually look at it, you'll see it all over the place. If something goes wrong, and you don't even have to look that far. You don't have to look at natural disasters. Just look at a car accident or something that happens on the side of the road. This happened to me. I don't think I've ever told you this. This happened to me about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I was not that far away from my house, and one of the craziest things I've ever seen driving happen. There was a downed power line in the road, which I didn't see or really pay attention to, but 2 or 3 cars ahead of me, a car's axles got caught up in this power line, and the car flipped. It went flying. Like the car actually left the ground, spun upside down, and landed on. And I'm on one side of the road. It flipped over the other side of the road and landed on the grass.
Wow.
In front of somebody's house, upside down, because it got tangled up in this power line. And it was literally only a couple cars ahead of me. And I was like, first of all, I was just like, did I just
see
what
that?
did I just see? Holy cow. And it was insane. And then I was like, and I'm, headed to work, and I'm like, and we all do, every car, of course, like, on both sides of the road comes to an immediate stop right here. And like, I get out of the car and I'm like, do you need me to call? And 15 other people are already out of their cars. 4 or 5 of them were already on the phone with the cops. 2 or 3 of them were already at the car on the other side of the road, like looking to see if the people were okay. Like just instantaneously, every single person stopped what they were doing. It was so much overkill that I ended up leaving.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm not even needed here. Like there's no benefit to me. Like I'll just be the 5th person to call 911. Mm-hmm. But the cops arrived pretty quick, and they got people out of the car. I think people were okay in that situation, which is insane. But it was also super dangerous because there's probably a live power line sitting there. So
yeah, no, I think that's something that for some reason, especially in our media today, it's always the anti-hero. It's always humans backstabbing. I mean, we talked about the Army of the Dead. Yeah, how the zombies were better humans than the humans, and it just
zombies won't leave anybody behind.
It just drives me up a wall. And this is what I love so much about the original Quiet Place is that it's the exact opposite. It is what human nature is. It's family. It's about having something, about leaning on each other.
Yeah.
And we talked about Emily Blunt, but her performance as the mother,
It's spectacular.
it is. If we talk about empowered women,
Oh, yeah.
that is the most empowered woman I have ever seen on screen. And maybe I'm forgetting something, but it was powerful to me, especially
Absolutely.
knowing, seeing two of my sons born, so knowing what childbirth is like, and then expecting that person to do that in a situation where you can't make a noise.
Not make a sound. And also have to worry about protecting your other kids at the same time.
But it all works. It's not.
It all completely works. I know.
Oh, man.
Look, part of that, and this gets to the complaints I've got with the horror genre in general as well, which is that like a lot of times, like horror, from a business standpoint, horror is often really cheap to make, but has really high upside because it's stuff that usually doesn't take a lot of dialogue. It's not very subtle, so it can be easily understood by people in any culture in any part of the world. You can subtitle it, but people don't really even need the subtitles for the most part, right?
Jason's coming to kill someone.
Yeah. The monster's around the corner. He's gonna eat this guy. That guy's got to run away or fight. So it's fight or flight. You know what's gonna happen, and you don't need the words a lot of the time. So as a result, you can make a horror movie for $20 million or $50 million, and you can make hundreds of millions of dollars around the world because there's not a lot of translation you need. But also as a result, you can end up with horror movies that just kind of phone it in a lot of the time. The acting isn't very good. It's usually people who are either very early in their careers, very new in their careers, or they're people who are kind of washed up.
Just need a paycheck.
I mean, look, there are some interesting things that are happening right now with like Nicolas Cage, because he's just been doing horror movie after horror movie after horror movie, and he is insane in every single one of them. My wife and I watched Color Out of Space not too long ago, and it's a bonkers movie. And I'm kind of glad Nick Cage was in it, because it's taking the most insane facets of his performances and personality and kind of leaning into it. But, and also, by the way, I'll give a shout out to a couple folks. I mean, certainly Jason Blum of Blumhouse Pictures, I think, does some cool stuff. Mostly, I think about it mostly on the business side, because what he does is he finds people like M. Night Shyamalan, for example, who really had a string of failures and who are not that expensive to get, but who are pretty experienced directors, and he'll have them, he'll give them a $2 million budget, and then they'll turn something interesting out of that.
And they'll make $200 million.
I know. Or he'll find people, inexperienced directors, but he'll get, great actors who are, either a little bit on the older side or just looking to do something different, that they've never done before or not been able to do before. And so he's had kind of an interesting model, but I just feel like so much of the time, it's just not that good. Emily Blunt is phenomenal in A Quiet Place. So is John Krasinski, and he's directing, and and they're producing this together. And I mean, plus they are actually a married couple, and they have a family to raise. They've got their own kids, and it's just mind blowing to me how good those are, especially given the circumstances around that.
I think if you would have told 2008 Paul that Jim Halpert was going to make your favorite horror movies of all time, I would not have believed.
No, it'd be
you.
Yeah. The other thing about A Quiet Place too, A Quiet Place also, and also A Quiet Place too, is that they, in a lot of ways, they're dramas.
Yeah.
Like, they're dramas set in the backdrop of horror, but they are actually family dramas.
That's not exactly, yeah. And that's what I was, when you think of horror, you think of the bad guy, you think of the villain.
Yeah.
You don't think of, it's always the stupid boyfriend who, I'm going to go back in. Or let's go, like the Geico commercial where
everybody's dumb.
Going through all the different options to run away from a killer. It's like, let's get in the running car. No, let's go to the chainsaw shed.
Yeah.
It's like, no, what do you got? I feel like that's what horror is just people making stupid decisions.
Yeah.
And
that's why you get stuff like Cabin in the Woods, which is just mocking all of those tropes. or Tucker and Dale versus Evil or whatever, where it's just like, look at these rednecks, and it's like, oh, those guys are murderers, and it's just like, no, we're just a couple guys fixing up a house. It's just like you can put a twist on those tropes because they're just so common, and they're everywhere, and they're boring at some point. So yeah, I agree. One thing we talked about too, I mean, I think this idea of, like strong female character, and we've heard this for years and years and years, and it became a buzzword in Hollywood, easily a decade or more ago. I mean, it was certainly like, I used to watch, I don't really do it that much anymore because they've gotten kind of boring, frankly, but I used to watch Hollywood Reporter Roundtable videos all the time. Every year they would come out with directors roundtable and actors and producers, and I'd watch all of them. I'd watch the comedy ones, I'd watch the horror ones, I'd watch actors, producers, directors, whatever. Sometimes they had composers ones, which was super exciting to me. And then they started asking, like, anytime a female actor especially would, like, they do the roundtable for best actresses or whatever. And the conversation, I always found it to be weirdly sexist, because the conversation for the male actors was always, how did you get into the mindset of this character? Or like, how did you, like that scene seemed like it would be very difficult to like actually express clearly, or, what were you thinking about? And there were interesting questions about process. There were interesting questions about acting. They were, how did you get into this business? And what brought you to this point in your career? And when you would watch the actresses roundtable, the female roundtable, it would all be strong female character. How, like, Hollywood is so sexist, but you play a strong female character. How is it that, how is it working as a woman in Hollywood? Like, those are the only questions. It was always like about the gender part of it. And it became a point where that dominated everything so much that it would no longer be about insights on acting or insights on producing or directing or whatever. And it just became about, what's it like to be a woman in this business? And then part of that for me too is that I started to realize that their conception of strong female character was anger and violence. And it was somebody who could be violent and like aggressive. Then you look at a movie like A Quiet Place, and you look at Emily Blunt. Like, Evelyn Abbott as a character, one of the strongest characters I've ever seen. Like, mentally, emotionally, physically also. Yeah. I mean, what she has to go through, we talked about the childbirth part in the first movie, but also like just everything in that movie. I mean, there's so many things in that movie that she has to overcome, and she does it without being hyper violent or hyper aggressive.
Or losing faith
in humanity, or her husband or her kids. She is absolutely like a rock solid, like, she is the linchpin of that family. Yeah. Fundamentally. And like, her kids lean on her, her husband leans on her, everybody, and she is probably the strongest person. And by the way, John Krasinski's Lee is a very strong character as well. But she is the center of all of it. And then she continues to be in A Quiet Place too. And like, it's weird to me that we have all these conversations about this stuff, and like, the thinking of what makes a strong character is always like violence. But she's not that violent. No. Like, nobody, in fact, in this is, and you can't be, really. I mean, there's not really much of a way to do that, frankly, because you're not anywhere near a match for these creatures. You see this, I mean, I think, particularly in the setup to A Quiet Place 2, like in the very beginning. Yeah. These aliens come in and just rip people apart. Like, there's just nothing.
They're basically invulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, there's no...
They can't swim, though.
They can't. Well, that also makes sense to me. Yeah. Because they seem very slippery. They don't really seem like they don't have hands, really, or they have sharp stabby appendages.
So this is I do have questions. So
I have some questions, but
so in A Quiet Place 2, there is an island off the coast of Northeast America.
yeah,
And
it's Atlantic.
they're safe. Cillian Murphy's character and
Regan,
the daughter,
the daughter.
get there, and it's just kind of normal,
Yeah,
everyday American life.
I don't know how they're running power.
That is another question. Where's the power
Although
coming
I
from?
feel like they may have shown some generators.
Yeah,
or
I'm
something at one
yeah,
point,
they, and so if that island is okay, are there other islands that are okay?
you would assume. One would assume.
Is Japan still just rolling along? Unless there was an asteroid.
Unless they actually got hit.
I'm just so now I need like a quiet place, expanded universe, Australia, and the
I
outback.
feel like Australia is just too big. I think
Probably
they would have gotten hit. But New Zealand, Tasmania, perhaps. Who knows?
I am intrigued. And what's so great about this is that it could just be another place in the world, and since you can't speak, you don't have to worry about languages.
Yeah. Well,
you just use sign language.
Yeah. So let's get into A Quiet Place 2 in a more specific way. So A Quiet Place 2 really picks up where A Quiet Place left off.
Pretty much right after.
I feel like pretty much right after. Although I'm a little curious about the timing of it because Cillian Murphy's character. So the setup is Cillian Murphy's character is a guy named Emmett, who is their friend. He's another dad. They have this Little League game or whatever, and his kid's another kid is playing Little League, and they're buddies. And he, his radio kind of goes nuts, and that's part of why they kind of look up in the sky and see what's going on. But Emmett is, when we meet him again, I guess he's been lighting fires, or he's been.
Yeah, they did this bit in the bit.
Yeah.
This scene
in
the first movie where they light the fire every night, and then throughout the valley you see
other fires, right, where there are presumably other people surviving, right? And so and this is the biggest spoiler of all, so you've been warned, when Lee dies in the first movie, John Krasinski's character, he dies very near the end of the first movie, and it's noble sacrifice and the whole thing. He leaves the rest of his family alone and, vulnerable, really, in a lot of ways. Now, again, every part of this family, I mean, Emily Blunt's character is heroic, but now she has a newborn infant to deal with.
She just gave birth.
Literally just gave birth, and her daughter is a young teenager and, deaf and granted, like Regan's character transformation in the first movie is phenomenal and she grows a lot and she has a great arc in the first movie. But the son, I believe the son's name is Marcus, he is still scared and he's a little kid.
He's a boy.
He's a boy and he's terrified, So putting everybody in this situation, I mean, especially without, another adult to actually help, protect people, like it's a very, very dangerous situation. So when they see this other fire and they kind of walk towards it very, dangerously through the woods and whatever, kind of walking down a train track or kind of, that kind of thing. And, they end up reconnecting with Emmett, but now Cillian Murphy plays Emmett his character is like just broken, just completely and utterly
His whole family is dead.
Whole family's dead. And you go, well, so that's the part of the question for me is like, how long are we really talking about here? Like how many days has it been since all of that? So I'm not quite clear on the timeline, but in any case, they meet up with him. He's holed up in like an abandoned, probably some kind of a factory, steel mill or something like that. And he's basically living underground in a boiler, essentially. Like he's able to shut himself in an heavy duty steel boiler and like basically hide himself from these horrible aliens. and he doesn't even want to help him right away, which I kind of get in this case. Of course, he does eventually. But what I really, really, really loved about A Quiet Place 2, I think, is that every character in that movie, save perhaps Emily Blunt, who really had a strong arc in the first movie, has a lot of character growth. You know, Marcus, you just mentioned, you know, has to learn how to go from being a boy to being a man, you know. Regan kind of becomes her father. She takes over Lee's role from the first movie as the chief protector, the bravest of them. Also, I thought her story was fantastic. I mean, essentially, again, like the way that I'll try not to spoil this part, but she's absolutely essential to the ultimate solution to these monsters. She is needed for that. And Emmett, of course, has to learn how to be a father again. He has to learn to trust, and be a person again. And all that is just beautifully handled, I thought. So I don't know. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. I like a movie where characters have a lot of growth and development.
And make decisions.
Men make
exactly
decisions.
What you would like.
Yeah.
Somebody would make in that situation.
Character-based decisions, and also they're not dumb decisions.
Yeah.
Like Marcus does make one dumb decision, but he's a kid.
I think Regan's decision to leave too without telling anybody is kind of dumb.
It is dumb, but I get it.
It's in line with what her character has done.
Yeah, but look, she's looking at it from the standpoint of she has an infant, you know, sibling, and a mom who needs to take care of the infant sibling. Emmett has demonstrated clearly that he's not interested in participating in anything, and Marcus is just not capable of keeping up. So I get it. I get why she would go out there on her own. I also get why Emily Blunt's character, Evelyn, would immediately tell Emmett, you gotta go get my daughter. So all of that makes perfect sense. What they did. Then the movie kind of becomes a road movie a little bit, because then they're kind of journeying from their little steel mill to a pier, a boat dock, whatever, where they can go across and try to find. Ultimately, they're trying to find where a radio station is broadcasting,
so they can broadcast.
So they can broadcast a sound that will disable these monsters. But I love that part of it. I think all of these arcs are really good, and I think that faith in humanity piece is really carries through. You know, and there are some crazy bad people.
Yeah,
and that's honestly the weirdest and sort of most.
That was the part in the movie in Quiet Place 2 that took me out of the experience the most. It was just kind of weird, but
yeah.
It's a minor nitpick. I think if you put it earlier in the movie or at a different location, it totally erases my question. But
yeah, I agree. I think so. So to get into that a little bit, like part of the reason why they explain away why they hadn't heard any radio broadcasts prior to this movie is because the valley blocked the radio signal. So if you were in the valley, you would not believe that there were other people out there or that there was technology still functioning or any of that kind of stuff. And so if you had there's kind of a band of, well, they're really like crazy redneck kind of hills have eyes kind of whatever, creepy. They go too far with that. I think is part of the problem, because it is like they're not humans anymore. Right. They're like, you know what it reminded me of, and this is just because they were on the docks, Waterworld. No. It reminded me of cause they had nets and they were like kind of Waterworld smokers. They're like smokers from Waterworld. Oh gosh. But God, by the way, that metaphor, just so on the nose.
That's just bad.
Smoking is bad, people. But if they were in the valley where they couldn't get radio signal, then I would be like, oh, okay, like they've gone a little bit nuts, and
makes sense. They're just surviving.
And also if they were a little bit less like over the top, I feel like. But they're a little bit over the top, and they're in a location where you could literally even see
the lights from the island.
From the island where people are safe. And then the other thing I think is sort of Djimon Hounsou's he makes some decisions at the end.
Yeah, it was some typical horror decisions. It was still. I mean, it doesn't.
No. These are very, very small.
Yeah,
that's how I felt with my wife when we came out of the movie. She was like, kind of. We were talking about some of the same things, like that decision at the end, like Djimon Hounsou makes a decision that is a classic horror, like, wait, I'm going to stop over here instead of continuing on, and then I'm just going to get killed kind of decision. You go, dude,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? But then I was like, these are nitpicky complaints.
Yeah, I think it only stands out just because the rest of the two films are the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. I agree. So, I mean, I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on the movie. I strongly recommend it. I think it's really, I mean, especially if you're a horror fan, like you'll absolutely love it. But I think the both of us can say, like, as not horror fans,
I am not
a big fan.
It's not that I genuinely dislike horror movies.
Yeah,
I will go out of my way not to see them. That's how much I dislike them. But yeah, this is one of my favorite movie franchises.
Yeah.
In a long time.
Do you think they're going to make a third?
Yes, it's making too much money.
What do you think they will? How do you think they will get there?
Well, you still have the mother and the baby and the son trapped on the mainland.
You do,
but they know that
they know how to defeat these things.
They know how to defeat them, and they also know that she got there.
Right.
And so they're going to go and get there.
Right.
And there's going to be issues along the way, but I also think it's going to be more about Marcus's story and continuing that arc of becoming a man.
Yeah.
Which would be pretty cool. And then also you could just take it quiet place, Japan.
Just somewhere else.
Hawaii.
For sure.
Guam.
Yeah, that feels too
money
grabbing to me. It's way too far removed from like the family that this is kind of about. But look, I'll say it again. I'll watch Emily Blunt in any movie, even the Mary Poppins movie, which was not very good. I watched her in that, but also I got to say that for I got to look up her name here again. But Millicent Simmons, who played Regan, she is, to my knowledge, she is actually deaf as an actress. She's excellent in both movies. She handles a lot of subtlety. There's a lot of subtlety in the performances in both of these movies that I thought were really, really strong. And, being a teenage actress, and Millicent kind of came out of nowhere, I think, especially for the first movie, does a great job. And and she's the big hero in this movie, which is fun place to be. But anyway, yeah. So I think that'll probably end our discussion of A Quiet Place right here. But for anybody who is a supporter of Out of Frame on Patreon or Subscribestar, which you can get to at patreon.com/outoframeshow or subscribestar.com/outoframeshow, stick around. We're going to do some Q&A after this, as we've been doing in the last several episodes, and we're going to continue doing that. For everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Do consider becoming a supporter of the show, but if nothing else, please follow us on YouTube, follow us on social media, join our email list. Paul, you want to talk about the email list for a second?
Yeah, so we actually got some new content coming out in these emails, newsletters once a week.
Yeah.
It's more of what you love with Out of Frame, just in a different format. We got recommendations from myself, Sean, Jen. We have Sean's thoughts on
stuff, whatever is going on.
Topics of the day. And also, it's a way to stick it to YouTube.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this many times before, and I actually bring it into the very beginning of the new Out of Frame episode, the newest Out of Frame episode. We've had a lot of issues with YouTube. I mean, it throttles content. Mm-hmm. We've had age restrictions. Even without like the content side of things, YouTube's copyright flagging algorithm is a nightmare to deal with. I have to deal with every time I put out an episode. As a result, I mean, we've done certain things, like we're on Odyssey now. So like anytime we put out a new episode, if it's age restricted, you can always find it on Odyssey. Mm-hmm. I think it's odyssey.com, just /out-of-frame show.
I think it's just Out of Frame.
Maybe it's just Out of Frame. We will put that link in the description here. But so you can find our content on Odyssey, and And now we're doing this newsletter because we don't know if it's going to get recommended to people. We don't know if it's going to show up in your feed, and just join the email list and you will never have to worry about it. We'll send this stuff directly to your inbox. And as Paul said, it's even more interesting stuff. Like we do additional recommendations for movies and all kinds of cool stuff in there. So join all the things, and we will definitely be excited to see you next time when we come back for the next episode. See you next time.